If you walk into any library or bookstore, you can find walls filled with books that tell someone's life story. On Wikipedia alone, there are 4 million articles that are biographical in nature. Everybody has a life story. In fact, Mark Twain once observed that if you were to take our thoughts into account, a person's life would be a library in itself. Every day would make a whole book of 80,000 words, 365 books a year. But there's something special about the story of those who follow Jesus Christ. That's because the Christian's story is linked with the story of Jesus. To understand what this means for us, we need to understand who Jesus was, what he did, and how it has affected us. Just about everybody has heard about Jesus. Most people think of him as a good man and a religious teacher. Some view him as a prophet, and the church calls him the Son of God. The Bible agrees with all these descriptions. According to one of the stories in the Gospels, Jesus asked his disciples what people were saying about him. Some say you're John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets, they answered. But what about you? Jesus asked. Who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Instead of disagreeing with Peter, Jesus confirmed that what he said was true. But what does it really mean to say that Jesus is the Christ and the Son of the living God? To say that Jesus is the Christ means that he's the promised one of God, Israel's Messiah, who was to come and save the world from its sins by suffering. To say that Jesus is the Son of the living God means that Jesus is God, come to us in human form, not only the human babe born in Bethlehem, but God taking to himself a human nature. While most religious traditions accept Jesus as a historical figure and religious teacher, not all of them agree with Peter's assessment. How do we know that Peter was right? We know that he was right because what Peter said agreed with what Jesus had to say about himself. Jesus said that he was one with the Father. He claimed to be the way to God. Yet despite these claims, Jesus was rejected, turned over to the Roman authorities, and hung on a cross until death. Instead of being surprised by these things, Jesus had warned his disciples in advance that they would take place. What's more, Jesus told his disciples that these things had to happen. Jesus said, The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. This, it turns out, is the heart of Jesus' story, and of ours, because it's at this point that our story intersects with Jesus' story. When the Bible calls us to believe in Jesus, this is what it's telling us to believe. It's calling us to believe that God became human, lived a perfect life, and died for our sins. It's telling us that on the third day, Jesus rose again from the dead to prove that he was who he said he was, and to show us that our sins were forgiven. This isn't the only thing that Jesus did. In fact, one of the gospel writers declared, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have the room for the books that would be written. What at first appeared to be the end of Jesus' story was really just a beginning. It was the beginning of a whole world of stories, and one of them is yours.